Welcome back to the deep dive. You shared your sources, we've distilled the research, and today we're tackling something absolutely fundamental to the human experience: attention.
Mhm.
I mean, it feels like modern life is actively designed to steal our focus. We click, we scroll, we react, and we're left wondering, what truly captures our attention?
Yeah.
Is it novelty? Is it reward? And crucially, can we ever truly choose stillness over that gravitational pull of distraction?
It's the central cognitive dilemma of our age, really.
Yeah.
And to answer, we've had to go deep into the architecture of the mind.
Okay.
We're pulling from, cutting-edge predictive neuroscience, detailed studies on dopamine, motivation, and the measurable cognitive effects of mental training, particularly meditation.
Right.
Our mission today is to move past the simple idea of attention as just a flashlight and reveal the core neurobiological mechanisms that assign value and focus. Then we can investigate whether practices like, non-action and letting go can fundamentally recalibrate this entire system toward effortless stillness.
I think that's an essential mission, especially for anyone listening who's constantly dealing with information overload. We often assume we see the world as it is, but your sources suggest that the act of perceiving itself is an act of creation, a continuous simulation.
That's it.
So let's unpack that foundational framework. The brain as a prediction engine.
That's the perfect place to start. The initial and perhaps most revolutionary principle we have to accept is that the brain does not perceive reality directly. It is an internal model builder.
Okay, so not a window to the world.
Not at all.
Yeah.
One source captures this by saying the brain constantly regurgitates the world. It constructs an internal simulation of reality. We call this the hierarchical generative model, or HGM, which is built entirely on this deep foundation of past experiences, assumptions, and learned behaviors.
So if I'm looking at the screen in front of me, I'm not receiving raw objective truth. I'm receiving a highly polished, filtered, and, personalized simulation built from decades of my own unique history.
That's the core insight, exactly. And the continuous, nonstop imperative of this simulation machine is to minimize surprise.
To minimize surprise.
Or, to put it more technically, to minimize prediction error.
Right, PE.
Prediction error is simply the gap between the brain's expectations, its internal predictions for what should happen next, and the actual incoming sensory data. If the sensory data matches the prediction, the brain saves energy and just carries on. If it doesn't match,
Then you get an error signal.
you generate a prediction error, and that triggers an adjustment. It forces the system to pay attention.
The practical implications of this are enormous for the listener. It means that what you experience as reality is a survival-optimized simulation.
Yes, optimized for survival, not for truth.
So your attention is inherently biased towards confirming the internal model, confirming your habits, confirming your learned fears, confirming your existing worldview, because that's the most efficient path.
Right. Efficiency is the key. The brain prioritizes being right and efficient, even if that means filtering out objective truth.
And this inherent bias is what determines what we pay attention to. If the brain's goal is to minimize that prediction error, it has two fundamental strategies to achieve it, and both of these strategies require the deployment of attention. Let's dive into those two strategies for minimizing prediction error, because they perfectly illustrate the interplay between our internal conceptual world and our external actions.
Okay, so the first strategy is perceptual inference. This is when the world surprises you, and you are forced to change your internal model, that HGM, to better match the sensory input.
So something unexpected happens, and I have to update my beliefs about the world.
Exactly. A classic example is seeing something completely out of place. You have to update your mind to account for this new piece of data. Your model of what happens in this room just got a major update.
Okay, so that's changing the mind. The second strategy is active inference.
Precisely. Instead of changing the mind, we change the world. Active inference is enacting movement or action to alter your sensory input so that the input now matches your existing prediction.
It's a form of willful confirmation bias through action.
It really is. You're making the world conform to your model.
That distinction is incredibly important. Can we see how these two compete, especially in moments where we feel unsure about something?
Absolutely. Imagine you're trying to read a blurry text on a billboard in the distance. Your brain generates multiple low-confidence hypotheses. Is it a 7 or a 1? The high level of ambiguity generates significant prediction error.
Okay, so you're stuck.
You're stuck. If you stay still, you're in perceptual inference, struggling to update your model with noisy, unreliable data. The more efficient path is active inference. You squint, you move closer, or you adjust your viewing angle.
You perform an action.
You perform an action to gather high-precision data that confirms one of your existing hypotheses.
Mm.
And crucially, your brain prefers active inference when the sensory input is highly uncertain or noisy, because movement is a much more reliable way to reduce prediction error than just waiting for a miracle of perception.
So, when we feel stuck or uncertain, the cognitive system often defaults to action as the fastest route to certainty. This makes me wonder, if the brain is constantly minimizing error, how does it decide which bits of incoming sensory data are reliable enough to warrant attention and potentially update the model?
That is where the deep neurobiology of attention within this predictive framework becomes so clear. It is not just a spotlight.
No.
Predictive processing asserts that attention is fundamentally the process of determining or weighting the precision of sensory input.
Precision, meaning its certainty, its reliability.
Both. It's the confidence the brain has in the signal.
Okay, let's make that concrete. What does precision weighting feel like in daily life?
Think of it like the brain setting the volume knob on different sensory channels based on how much it trusts the input.
I like that analogy.
If the environment is dark and noisy, the brain assigns low precision to that input, turns the volume down, and relies heavily on its existing top-down predictions, its internal simulation of what should be there.
It's filling in the gaps with its own story.
It has to. But if the input is crystal clear and certain, like a sudden loud sound in a quiet room, the brain assigns high precision, it cranks the volume way up, and weights that data heavily. That makes it a powerful candidate to either confirm or dramatically update the internal model.
So attention isn't just about pointing. It's an assignment of confidence. It's the brain saying, I declare this piece of information reliable enough to potentially overwrite or confirm my existing reality.
That's it.
And if we were constantly assigning precision, this explains why we are drawn to loud, clear, or emotionally salient signals. They have high assigned precision, even if they are ultimately distracting.
That's the precise mechanism. And this deep neurobiological function explains why, long before we had fMRI machines, cognitive psychology developed these powerful, intuitive models of attention that acted like filters and gates.
Speaking of those classic models, they really centered on selective attention, the necessity of focusing on one input while strategically shutting out competing stimuli. The classic experiment here, still taught today, is the dichotic listening task.
Right. Participants wear headphones, they hear different speech streams in each ear, and they're instructed to attend to one channel and repeat what they hear, a process called shadowing.
And the whole point was to figure out what happens to the stuff you're not paying attention to.
Exactly. The key insight early on was trying to determine how much, if any, semantic information meaning was processed from the unattended channel.
And the initial theories, like Broadbent's filter theory, suggested that the unattended information was filtered out very early, before its meaning was even processed.
Right. You might register physical properties like pitch or volume, but not the content itself. It's like it never even gets in.
But these theories quickly ran into a major real-world complication, the cocktail party effect.
The perfect example. If you're at a noisy party, deeply involved in one conversation, that's your attended channel, and someone across the room says your name, the unattended channel, your focus immediately snaps to it.
It just cuts right through.
It breaks through the filter. The sheer relevance of the stimulus, your name, proves that some meaning is getting through.
That is such a powerful demonstration of the brain's internal priority system overriding the conscious filter. It suggested that certain signals, which have high emotional salience or personal relevance—
High assigned precision in PP terms.
Exactly. High assigned precision, they have a lower threshold for recognition. This led to revisions like Treisman's attenuation model, where the filter doesn't completely block information, it just turns down the volume.
And visually, we used spatial metaphors like the spotlight model and the zoom lens model to describe how we allocate attention in space. We can narrow the focus like a zoom lens to gain high clarity on a small region, or broaden it like a wide spotlight at the cost of clarity.
But as you mentioned earlier, these are just powerful descriptions of the behavioral effect.
Right. They tell us what happens, but not why. Predictive processing gives us the underlying why we zoom in or out is tied to minimizing error and seeking high-precision input.
With those models in mind, let's connect attention allocation to something we all care about: learning and memory. This brings us to the critical battle between goal-directed focus and reflexive distraction.
This section is crucial for anyone trying to acquire new skills or retain complex knowledge. We have the top-down attention system, that goal-directed, willful control. deploying attention covertly based on a cue.
I am choosing to focus on this.
Exactly. And then you have the bottom-up attention system, the reflexive, stimulus-driven reaction, like turning when a door slams.
The UNCAFR study, which examined these systems using fMRI, provided a clear neurological blueprint for which system actually supports successful learning.
Indeed. The study identified the regions associated with goal-directed control. We can call them the goal-directed planning centers. When these areas were actively deploying attention based on a goal or a cue, they significantly predicted successful episodic encoding when the relevant stimulus appeared.
In other words, deliberate, goal-oriented focus primes the brain to lay down lasting memories.
That's the takeaway.
But the reflexive system seems to do the opposite. It seems to actively sabotage memory.
It does. Stimulus-driven reflexive attention activates regions we can call the reflexive interrupt systems. The study found that activity in these regions overlaps significantly with effects correlating with encoding failure.
Wow. So it's not just that distraction means you missed the information.
No, it's more profound. The reflective shift itself seems to hinder the successful memory formation process. It's like it scrambles the signal.
Here's the critical synthesis of that study then. The dedicated top-down systems promoted memory formation, while the reflexive bottom-up systems actively undermined it. And this was all mediated by how these systems interacted with the visual object recognition areas.
You've hit on the critical distinction. It provides a direct neural explanation for why multitasking and constant distraction feels so exhausting and so ineffective.
It's not just a feeling, it's a biological reality.
It's a biological reality.
Yeah.
To successfully embed a memory, you need the dedicated top-down system to run smoothly. If the external world constantly forces you to shift attention reflexively, if you're constantly checking notifications, emails, reacting to unexpected stimuli, you are literally interrupting the neurobiological process required for successful learning.
Distraction isn't just a nuisance, it's an enemy of encoding.
A direct enemy.
This means, like, if you're trying to learn a complex topic, the moment a surprising notification pulls your attention, it's not just the time you lost, it's the active impedance of the memory circuits that were trying to process the original information.
Exactly. And this connects directly back to our initial predictive models, because what guides top-down attention in the first place? Predictions, expectations, and established frameworks.
The guiding forces for this top-down attention are our mental frameworks, which we call schemas. This links us back to Neisser's schema theory.
Schemas are the organizing structures of the brain. They are, you could say, the scaffolding for your hierarchical generative model. They organize knowledge, beliefs, and behavioral expectations.
They're cognitive shortcuts.
Essential cognitive shortcuts designed for processing efficiency. For instance, your schema for a library guides you to search for books quietly, ignoring the sensory input of traffic outside. It tells you what to expect and what to pay attention to.
But if they are so crucial for efficiency, why are they also the source of so much personal difficulty, like rigid beliefs or outdated fears?
Because of the biology of learning. We know that the sensitive periods for brain development and plasticity, the periods when it's easiest to form and drastically change these high-level schemas, they decline significantly, and the final windows close around age 20, maybe 25.
Okay.
So the beliefs and behavioral patterns learned during these formative sensitive periods become established neural circuitry. They become the bedrock of the model.
This means that in adulthood, these circuits can be stubbornly resistant to change. The old coping mechanism learned at 8 years old, which was maybe necessary then, is now an established neural pattern, a rigid schema that fires automatically at age 40, even though it's entirely maladaptive for an adult situation.
That's the dilemma. The brain is optimized for efficiency based on its history. If your HGM predicts the world is threatening, your attention system will assign high precision to threatening input and filter for threats, even if objectively you are safe.
And altering these deeply established schemas once that sensitive period has ended requires a systemic shift, not just willpower.
Exactly. It requires changing the very priority system itself.
And changing that priority system requires motivation. If my schema is rigid, what is the engine powerful enough to motivate me to challenge my own predictions? That moves us squarely into the role of dopamine in action.
Yes, the prime mover.
Dopamine is the celebrity neurotransmitter, right? It's linked to pleasure, reward, addiction, motivation. For decades, we linked it most strongly to the reward prediction error model.
The RPE model, yeah.
The signaling of the difference between expected reward and actual reward.
And that RPE model has been instrumental in understanding how habits form. But recent human neuroimaging studies are challenging this conventional, simplified view.
How so?
Well, these studies orthogonally manipulated the action requirement, go or no go, and the effective valence, reward or punishment. They were designed to ask, is the brain more interested in the value of the outcome or the effort required to get there?
So they untangled the action from the reward. What did the striatum, the key dopamine-rich area, reveal when they did that?
They found a surprising dominance. The bull responses in the striatum, both dorsal and ventral, which includes the nucleus accumbens and the SNVTA, the source of most dopamine. They were overwhelmingly dominated by the anticipation of action requirements, not the valence alone.
Wait, so the system was more activated by the sheer necessity of doing something rather than just the promise of the outcome?
Exactly. I mean, look at the key finding. Bolder responses were reliably and significantly higher in the go-to-win condition than in the no-go-to-win condition.
Even though both conditions signaled the exact same expected value, the same potential win.
The exact same salience. The brain's motor loop was excited by the anticipation of effortful action required to obtain the win, even more than the win itself.
This is a major conceptual pivot. It moves the primary function of the striatum away from being a purely passive value calculator that just registers RPEs.
Right.
Instead, it seems to be primarily involved in action invigoration, the engine that provides the drive to execute movement and fulfill a goal, which, as we establish, is the basis of active inference.
And the findings using pharmacology underscored this. When they boosted dopamine pharmacologically, it enhanced this dominance of action over valence in the striatum. The system becomes even more tuned to the go signal.
So our attention is driven not just by reward, but by the imperative to act. The brain pays attention to opportunities for action because action is the most powerful way to resolve uncertainty and reduce prediction error.
It's a very powerful reframing.
This reframes procrastination, too. If we aren't motivated to act, perhaps our internal system hasn't assigned enough precision or necessity to the action requirement of the task.
That's a powerful application of the idea. The dopamine system seems less about pleasure and more about the vigorous deployment of effort towards minimizing uncertainty. But effort and outcome are still tied to value, of course.
If the action engine is in the striatum, we still need the component that tells us whether that action is worth pursuing, the intrinsic value. Where does affective valence, the feeling of good or bad, reside?
That remains centered in the amygdala circuitry. While action dominates the striatum signal, the amygdala is central to processing motivational guidance and emotional salience.
Okay.
It acts as a pathway for attention guided by that motivational valence.
And does the amygdala only focus on positive valence, the things we want?
Not at all. And this is key. Amygdala neurons reflect spatial attention towards stimuli that promise reward or threaten punishment. Studies show it combines information about space and value, essentially tagging locations or objects with emotional significance.
So it's a general significance tagger.
It is. And what's truly revealing is that studies suggest a substantial similarity in amygdala neuronal activity during conditioned appetitive so rewarding and aversive punishing emotional arousal.
That suggests the amygdala doesn't spend its energy distinguishing between whether the urgency is positive or negative. It just screams, pay attention, this matters.
Exactly. Its primary function appears to be processing general emotional salience. It's the wanting or urgency signal that overrides lower-level processes, regardless of whether that urgency stems from seeking a reward or avoiding a threat.
It ensures that motivationally critical stimuli break through the attentional filter, much like the cocktail party effect, but at the level of core survival and emotional relevance.
A perfect parallel.
So our attention system is the symphony of prediction, action, and emotional urgency. We pay attention to what we predict, we are invigorated by the requirement to act, and the amygdala ensures we don't ignore anything that holds high emotional stakes, positive or negative.
You've got it. That's the architecture.
This leads us to the critical question. If we are deploying top-down control to overcome distraction and focus on the difficult action, what is the cost? Focusing isn't free.
It is absolutely not free. Cognitive control, or sustained effortful attention, it draws on a limited depletable resource. This resource is essential for self-control, and studies even show that its availability can be linked to biological factors like blood glucose levels.
So when we talk about feeling mentally drained, we are literally describing the depletion of this resource.
You are, and we need a mechanism to monitor this depletion. That's the brain's performance check, the conflict monitor.
The alarm system.
The alarm system. The key region here is the anterior cingulate cortex, the ACC. The ACC acts as a monitor, detecting conflict, like the inherent conflict when your automatic reading habit clashes with your goal to name the ink color in a Stroop task.
Right.
When that conflict is detected, the ACC activates and sends a signal that triggers reactive adjustments in top-down control, often involving the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the DLPFC.
So the ACC is the alarm bell that says, hey, your performance is slipping or the demand is too high. And the DLPFC is the control tower that boosts the effort needed for the current task.
Precisely. Now, here's a fascinating psychological finding.
Yeah.
Subjective mental effort, that feeling of strain, is associated not with the raw level of control being exerted,
Okay.
but with the change in the control process. You feel effortful strain when the ACC monitors an unmet demand and has to trigger a significant reactive adjustment. It is the adjustment and transition that registers as costly.
That's a crucial distinction.
It's key because it explains how you can have a concert pianist operating at an incredibly high level of cognitive control, but experiencing deep flow and low subjective effort. The process is smooth, the control level is high but stable. No alarms are going off.
But when we are relying on brute force control, we run into the paradox of control. If this effortful attention is a limited resource, pushing too hard now means borrowing from tomorrow.
This paradox is why relying solely on willpower is a fundamentally flawed life strategy.
Right.
Effortful attention control, when deployed excessively, undermines subsequent performance on entirely unrelated tasks. It's a cross-domain depletion effect.
Okay, let's look at the evidence, because this is where the implications for daily life become really stark.
They do.
Let's delve into that. If I just force myself to focus on a difficult presentation for 3 hours, how does that resource depletion affect me later?
Okay, so the first example involves thought suppression. After participants used effortful attention control on one task, their capacity to suppress unwelcome or intrusive thoughts was significantly reduced.
So you can't keep unwanted thoughts out.
The resource normally used to hold complex concepts in working memory was used up, leaving them vulnerable. For example, some studies show that effortful control increased the salience of unwelcome thoughts, like those related to mortality or death, because the cognitive buffer was down.
You expend the effort trying to focus, and then your internal world immediately fills with anxiety because you lack the buffer to push those intrusive thoughts away.
That makes perfect sense. The dam holding back the internal noise has crumbled.
Exactly. Now, what about the effects on ingrained societal biases?
That's the second and deeply concerning finding. After an attention control task depleted their resources, participants in a subsequent experiment were more likely to identify harmless tools as guns when they were briefly preceded by the face of a black man versus a white man.
Wow.
The conclusion is sobering. Effortful control reduced the capacity to control automatic, pre-existing social or racial biases. When the conscious control system is exhausted, the brain defaults to its quickest, most automatic, and often most biased prediction pathways.
So fatigue doesn't just make us worse at math, it makes us worse, less ethical people, because we lack the reserve to override our deeply ingrained, automated, and potentially maladaptive schemas.
Absolutely. The third example involves interpersonal relationships and self-presentation. Individuals with insecure attachment styles, avoidant or anxious, typically struggle to self-disclose at an optimal level of intimacy.
Okay.
Effortful attention tasks reduce their ability to present themselves adaptively. They relied more heavily on their default, biased, maladaptive attachment scripts. Avoidance became too distant. Anxious individuals became too clingy.
So their capacity to use conscious control to modulate their behavior toward a healthy mean was just gone.
She was gone.
So explicit controlled attention, the thing we desperately try to cultivate, is a limited, depleting resource that, when overused, leaves us vulnerable to our worst automated behaviors, biases, and fears. This underscores why simply trying harder is an exhausting and ultimately self-defeating strategy for achieving deep focus or personal change. We need a different path.
We need a smarter path, not a harder one.
If the brute force of effortful control is self-defeating, the central question remains: how do we achieve productive, focused attention without the strain? How do we find that sought-after stillness?
The answer lies in shifting skilled function from the explicit, effortful system to the implicit, automatic system. This is the cultivation of effortless attention and the flow state.
Flow.
Flow is high-intensity attention accompanied by remarkably low subjective effort, where peak performance is achieved with internal peace.
This state of flow, or autotelic experience, is most reliably triggered, as established by Csikszentmihalyi's work, when perceived challenges are well matched to one's capacities. It requires you to stretch your skills just enough to be fully absorbed.
And when this happens, we see clear physiological markers. We enter a state of flow physiology. Subjective effort decreases, which is often accompanied by reduced activity in the corrugator supercilii, the frown muscle,
The frown muscle, I like that.
which is a marker of distress or negative affect. We see slower, deeper respiration. And crucially, experts in flow demonstrate a remarkable ability to regulate the balance between the sympathetic, the arousal system, and parasympathetic, the rest and digest system.
The examples of highly skilled performers here are remarkable.
They are. Studies of professional musicians, specifically pianists, show that during exceptionally difficult passages, they are able to immediately activate the parasympathetic system
While they're playing.
while they're performing at peak capacity. Most novices, when faced with high cognitive demand, default to sympathetic arousal stress, anxiety. The expert maintains peak cognitive control without the internal stress response, demonstrating that this nervous system regulation is vital for sustaining flow without fatigue.
It sounds like the highest form of cognitive control isn't effort. It's the freedom from continuous reactive effort.
Precisely. And this freedom is often achieved by adopting an external focus of attention, a concept often summarized by the constrained action hypothesis.
What does that mean?
When performing complex motor skills, focusing attention on the effect of the movement, an external focus, is far more effective for performance and learning than focusing internally on the body parts or muscles themselves.
So if I am an expert golfer, focusing on my internal grip mechanics, the movement itself will actually constrain my performance.
Yes.
But focusing on the ball's trajectory, the external effect allows the automatic system to run flawlessly.
That's the mechanism. Consciously controlling a well-learned movement forces the explicit system to interrupt the implicit system, which already has perfect know-how of the skill residing in the basal ganglia. The goal of mastery, therefore, is to shift function into that implicit system where it is fast, accurate, and, most importantly, effortless.
So if mastery is effortless attention and effortful control leaves us vulnerable, how does mental training like meditation fundamentally recalibrate the entire predictive architecture we've discussed? The schemas, the precision assignments, the sense of self.
Meditation provides a systemic mechanism for change, which some researchers suggest can reopen sensitive learning periods by directly altering the high-level predictive models established in the brain.
So you're changing the framework itself.
You're changing the framework so you don't have to address every single maladaptive behavior individually.
Let's explore the predictive processing account of meditation, which uses the phrase, from many to N1. What does that mean?
Okay, so the mind typically engages in mental activities with what we call temporal thickness. Narrative self-talk, planning, rehearsing, worry all abstract concepts high in the hierarchical model.
Always thinking about the past or the future.
Exactly. Meditation systematically reduces this tendency, shifting attention toward temporal precision, the immediate raw sensory input in the here and now. We are moving attention away from the high-level complex narrative predictions and towards the low-level precise sensory data.
This is beautifully described as pruning the counterfactual tree. We stop the brain from constantly simulating infinite future scenarios that don't exist.
That's exactly right. The narrative self, which is largely associated with the default mode network, the DMN, is constantly busy simulating and predicting. By focusing on the breath or immediate sensations, the meditator shifts resources to the lower-level sensory processing networks.
And the central mechanism that makes this possible is letting go, or non-action. How does non-action teach the system to change?
In focused attention meditation, the practice is continuously letting go of distractions, thoughts, urges, memories. This is the policy of non-action. If you feel an itch, but you refuse to scratch it. The brain observes the urge, the high-precision assignment telling you to act, without the typical expected action outcome correspondence, which would be scratching and relief.
Ah, okay.
By continuously observing precision assignments without agentive engagement, without acting on the thought or urge, the system begins to disrupt the inference that it must identify itself as the source of those urges.
So, if I enjoy the stillness and letting go in meditation, I am actively recalibrating the modular mind by demonstrating to the prediction engine that its high-level abstract models like the narrative self are not necessary or even reliable.
Yes.
I am strengthening the capacity for present moment, precise sensory experience. The one.
You are literally altering the unit of identification. The feeling of agency over every thought dissolves. You are realizing the constructed nature of the urge. This process, however, requires a crucial cognitive capacity called meta-awareness.
Which is the ability to know that you are currently thinking or distracted. You can't let go of a distraction if you haven't realized you become lost in it.
Absolutely. This capacity is modeled computationally as mental action, the policy selection over higher-level cognitive states. It is the ability to notice, without judgment, that the mind has drifted. This ability is what allows the meditator to apply the policy of non-action and prune that counterfactual tree.
Now, what does the hard evidence say about this recalibration? Does the brain actually run quieter?
It does. Studies show that experienced meditators exhibit a significant decrease in the amplitude of the feedback-related negativity, or FRN. The FRN is a component measured via EEG that normally signals prediction error.
It's the brain's internal, oh no, I made a mistake, alarm.
That's a great way to put it. It fires immediately after a negative outcome or a failed prediction.
And that is powerful. A decrease in FRN suggests their internal alarm system is just running quieter.
Precisely. It suggests a fundamental reduction in novel prediction formation and prediction error signaling during learning. Their predictive machine is simply more efficient and less reactive. They are observing reality with less emotional drama.
And advanced practitioners show a dissolution of the internal architecture that defines the self.
Yes, studies on advanced concentration absorption meditation show increased functional connectivity between the default mode network, our self-referential network, and the frontoparietal network, our cognitive control network.
And those two are normally at odds, right?
They're typically anticorrelated. When one is active, the other is quiet. Their increased synchrony suggests a significant breakdown of the internal-external dichotomy and reduced modularity. The self-referential processing and the control processing are dissolving into a unified, less structured state.
This sounds like the pathway to non-dual awareness, the theoretical ultimate state.
Which is characterized by minimal temporal depth, non-conceptual awareness, and the complete dissolution of the subject-object distinction. The self, as an abstract conceptual entity, dissolves into the raw, temporally precise flow of experience. The goal of stillness is therefore not simply relaxation, but a deep, systemic reprogramming of the precision architecture itself.
This pursuit of effortless attention and stillness requires us to trust the non-effortful implicit system, which is where true expertise lies. We need to better understand the relationship between the explicit system conscious thought and the implicit system.
The deep know-how.
The deep know-how.
Right. The explicit system handles abstract propositional knowledge. It's slow, serial, and limited by the constraints of working memory. The implicit system handles the know-how, real-time control, skilled movements, automated tasks. It's fast, unconscious, and runs in parallel, governed by lower brain centers like the basal ganglia.
And the greater the skill, the more its function moves into the implicit system, becoming automatic and non-effortful.
Exactly.
This challenges the classical view of rationality, which assumes that human thought is abstract and modal. But cognitive science shows that thought is actually image-based and modal, deriving its structure and meaning from sensor-motor patterns.
That's a crucial correction. Our concepts are not abstract symbols floating in a void. They are records of neural activation that arose during perception and action. And crucially, as Antonio Damasio showed, these concepts are also somatically marked with unconscious, embodied feelings of goodness or badness, what he terms somatic markers.
These markers, these gut feelings, these unconscious biases are the essential tacit knowledge that makes real-world decision-making possible.
Absolutely essential. Damasio's work with patients who had frontal lobe lesions and were deprived of these embodied emotional biases demonstrated they became paralyzed by indecision.
I remember this work. It's stunning.
It is. They can still perform abstract moral reasoning perfectly, but in real life, they were overwhelmed. They couldn't efficiently assign unconscious value or urgency to options. Their decision-making landscape was hopelessly flat, leading to infinite deliberation over trivial choices.
This is a devastating illustration of the necessity of tacit knowledge. Effective rationality relies not on explicit calculation, but on cultivating the appropriate, automatic, unconscious valuation of options.
And this deep cognitive understanding strongly reinforces virtue ethics. Virtue ethics focuses on cultivating automatic, effortless dispositions to act virtuously, the inherent know-how. rather than relying on continuous, depleting, explicit calculation, which we now know can interfere with optimal performance.
So the goal is to internalize the correct rules so thoroughly that the virtuous action becomes automatic, non-effortful, and integrated into the implicit system.
That's the path to mastery.
We've taken a comprehensive journey today, from the micro mechanisms of prediction to the macro implications for life mastery. We moved from viewing attention as a simple gate to understanding it as precision weighting in a continuous prediction machine. We saw that our motivation is driven by action and emotional salience, not just pure reward.
And we established that reliance on effortful, explicit control is a limited, depleting strategy that leaves us vulnerable to our worst biases. Conversely, embracing non-action and letting go, the core of stillness training, recalibrates the system by reducing the emphasis on complex, abstract modeling and strengthening the capacity for present moment, precise sensory experience.
So the answer to your core question, the driving force behind this deep dive, is a resounding yes. If you enjoy the stillness and the letting go in meditation, you are systemically reprogramming the modular mind.
That's what the evidence suggests.
You are training the brain to recognize the constructed, illusory nature of certain high-level predictions and dramatically decreasing the neurological effort required to stay focused by reducing the pervasive signaling of prediction error. It is the true path to cognitive freedom.
Which leaves us with our final provocative thought. The culmination of effortless attention and action isn't just about achieving a state of flow during a single task. It is about cultivating a personal taste or a personal tact that shapes the quality of your entire life.
A personal tact.
This tact is the automatic, implicit ability to recognize the appropriate cue and respond virtuously, elegantly, and without effort within the complex syntax of everyday life. This suggests that the highest form of cognitive control is ultimately the freedom from the need for continuous, depleting effort. So the question for you is, what habits of attention are you cultivating daily, and are they leading you toward exhausting control or toward effortless non-dual freedom?
We leave you with that to ponder until the next deep dive.